Good evening, and welcome to Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth, and tonight we're diving into a story that might seem lighthearted on the surface, but actually cuts right to the heart of how modern surveillance culture, social media monitoring, and the beauty-industrial complex intersect in ways most people never consider. Stay with us.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Tonight, we're asking a question that millions of people across Asia and around the world have been asking for nearly a decade now, but we're asking it differently. When a man turns 60 and the internet collectively loses its mind because he looks 30, what does that tell us about the systems watching us, tracking us, and profiting from our insecurities? The answer is more unsettling than you might think.
We're covering the story of Singaporean photographer Chuando Tan, who just turned 60 years old, and whose birthday photos have once again broken the internet. But we're not here to gawk. We're here to investigate what happens when a single person's appearance becomes a global data event, and who is actually harvesting the engagement that follows.
That's exactly right, Alex. Because behind every viral moment, behind every comment saying he can't be 60, there are algorithms cataloging, sorting, and monetizing that attention. There are beauty companies watching the analytics in real time. And there are surveillance systems in Singapore and beyond that are deeply intertwined with the platforms where this content lives.
So let's get into it. Chuando Tan. 60 years old. And the world cannot believe it. Let's start with the facts, and then let's follow the money and the data.
Here's what we know. According to reporting from the South China Morning Post, Singaporean fashion photographer and former model Chuando Tan turned 60 this week, and he marked the occasion by sharing a reflective message alongside photos posted to his Instagram account on Tuesday. Within hours, those posts attracted hundreds of thousands of likes and a wave of comments from followers around the world marveling at how little he appears to have aged.
And this isn't new. Tan first became a global social media sensation nearly a decade ago, around 2017, when photos of him went viral and people discovered he was already in his 50s. At the time, he had roughly a few 100,000 followers. The viral moment catapulted him into the millions. Today, he commands an enormous audience, and every birthday becomes a renewed moment of collective disbelief.
What's important to understand is Tan's background. He's not some random influencer who appeared out of nowhere. He was a working model in Singapore in the 1990s. He transitioned into fashion photography, building a legitimate career behind the camera. He's photographed major campaigns and celebrities. This is a person with real professional credentials, not a manufactured internet personality.
And that's what makes his story so fascinating from an investigative standpoint. Because when his appearance first went viral, it wasn't a marketing campaign. It wasn't engineered by a PR firm. It was organic. People genuinely could not believe a man in his 50s looked the way he did. But what happened after that organic moment is where the surveillance and data story begins.
Let's talk about what happens when something goes viral on Instagram, because most people don't think about the infrastructure behind the spectacle. When Chuando Tan's birthday photos started racking up hundreds of thousands of likes, Instagram's algorithm immediately began categorizing that engagement. It identified the demographics of who was liking, commenting, and sharing. It tracked geographic data, age ranges, gender breakdowns, time of day patterns, and cross-referenced all of that with existing advertising profiles.
In other words, the moment you tap that heart button on Chuando Tan's photo, you're not just expressing admiration. You're feeding a data machine owned by Meta, the parent company of Instagram, that is building an ever more detailed profile of your interests, your insecurities, your aspirations. And that profile is then sold to advertisers, including, and this is critical, the beauty and anti-aging industry.
According to market research, the global anti-aging market is projected to be worth well over $100 billion within the next few years. And the companies driving that market are among the most aggressive purchasers of social media advertising data. When a post about a 60-year-old man who looks 30 goes viral, that's not just a fun story. That's a goldmine for companies selling serums, supplements, skincare routines, and cosmetic procedures.
Think about it. Within hours of Tan's birthday post, how many targeted ads for anti-aging products do you think were served to the people who engaged with it? We can't know the exact number, but based on how Meta's advertising platform works, the answer is almost certainly in the millions. Every single person who liked that photo, who left a comment saying, "What's your secret?" was immediately flagged as a high-value target for anti-aging product advertising.
And this is where it gets deeper, Alex. Because Chuando Tan himself has been remarkably transparent about his approach. In past interviews, he's credited his appearance to a disciplined lifestyle. He's talked about swimming regularly, avoiding late nights, eating clean, staying hydrated, and getting adequate sleep. He's not out there hawking miracle supplements or pushing expensive skincare lines. He's essentially saying the secret is discipline and consistency.
Which is exactly the message the beauty industrial complex does not want amplified. Because you can't monetize, go swimming and get enough sleep. You can't build a billion-dollar product line around, drink water and eat vegetables. The industry needs people to believe that youthful appearance requires expensive intervention, proprietary formulas, professional treatments. A man who looks 30 at 60 through basic lifestyle discipline is, in a strange way, a threat to that narrative.
And yet, paradoxically, his virality fuels the very industry that his message undermines. Because the platforms don't amplify his actual message about discipline and healthy living. They amplify the spectacle, the disbelief, the how is this possible reaction. And that reaction, that sense of inadequacy and wonder, is precisely what drives people to seek out products and procedures. The algorithm doesn't care about truth. It cares about engagement, and insecurity is one of the most engaging emotions there is.
Now let's talk about the surveillance angle specifically, because Singapore is one of the most surveilled cities on Earth, and that context matters enormously here. Singapore has deployed an extensive network of surveillance cameras across the city-state. The government has implemented facial recognition technology in various public systems. And the country's approach to data governance, while often praised for efficiency, raises significant questions about privacy and individual autonomy.
According to reports from digital rights organizations, Singapore's surveillance infrastructure is among the most sophisticated in Southeast Asia. The government has rolled out programs that integrate biometric data, including facial recognition, into everything from law enforcement to public housing access. When we talk about a person's face becoming a global phenomenon, we need to understand that in Singapore, faces are literally tracked and catalogued by state systems.
And here's an angle that rarely gets discussed. When Chuando Tan's face goes viral globally, that face becomes part of an enormous dataset. Facial recognition systems around the world are trained on publicly available images. Research has shown that photos scraped from social media platforms, including Instagram, have been used to train facial recognition algorithms without the knowledge or consent of the people in those photos. Tan's face, one of the most shared and analyzed faces in Asian social media, has almost certainly been incorporated into multiple facial recognition training datasets.
This is a pattern we see again and again in surveillance reporting. The line between entertainment and surveillance infrastructure has effectively disappeared. Your vacation photos train facial recognition. Your birthday selfies feed biometric databases. And when someone like Chuando Tan generates millions of data points through viral engagement, that data doesn't just evaporate after the news cycle. It becomes permanent training material for systems that track, identify, and monitor human beings.
Let's also examine the cultural dimension here, because it's critical to understanding the full picture. The fascination with Chuando Tan's appearance isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening in a cultural context where Asian men, and Asian people generally, have historically been subject to intense scrutiny and stereotyping by Western media. The ageless Asian trope is itself a form of racialized surveillance, a way of rendering an entire population as objects of curiosity rather than full human beings.
That's an incredibly important point. When Western media frames this story, and it has been covered extensively by outlets in the US, UK, and Europe, the framing almost always centers on disbelief and exoticism. Can you believe this Asian man looks so young? The subtext is that this is somehow abnormal, remarkable, almost supernatural. And that framing feeds into a long history of Orientalism and racialized othering that treats Asian bodies as spectacles to be examined.
Chuando Tan himself seems to navigate this with grace. His Instagram presence is confident and self-assured. He's not performing youth or begging for validation. He's simply living his life and sharing it. But the machinery around him, the algorithms, the media coverage, the advertising ecosystem, that machinery doesn't care about his dignity or autonomy. It cares about extracting value from the attention his appearance generates.
And let's follow the money on that extraction. Instagram takes a cut through advertising revenue. Media outlets generate clicks and ad impressions from covering the story. Beauty brands see spikes in engagement and sales when they target the audiences engaging with this content. And facial recognition companies quietly scrape the data to improve their products. At every single step of this chain, someone is profiting. The question is whether the people generating the engagement, the followers, the commenters, the sharers, have any idea how thoroughly they're being harvested.
Now, I want to dig into something that most coverage of this story completely ignores, and that's the relationship between Singapore's government and the tech platforms where this content lives. Singapore has some of the most aggressive content regulation laws in the world. The Protection from Online Falsehoods and Manipulation Act, known as POFMA, gives the government extraordinary power to demand corrections, takedowns, and even criminal penalties for content it deems to be false or misleading.
And while POFMA has been framed as a tool against misinformation, digital rights advocates have raised serious concerns about its chilling effect on free expression. In a country where the government can legally compel platforms to alter or remove content, the question of who controls the narrative around any viral moment, even one as seemingly harmless as a birthday photo, takes on a very different dimension.
We're not suggesting that Chuando Tan's birthday photos are subject to government censorship. But we are pointing out that the platform where he shares those photos operates under a regulatory framework that gives the Singaporean government significant leverage over what content is amplified, suppressed, or modified. That's the reality of social media in a surveillance state, even a prosperous, well-functioning one like Singapore.
And this connects to a broader pattern that we cover regularly on Truth Report, the convergence of corporate surveillance and state surveillance. Meta, the company that owns Instagram, has a complex relationship with governments around the world. It complies with data requests. It adjusts its algorithms to comply with local regulations. It shares user data with law enforcement. The platform where millions of people are engaging with Chuando Tan's photos is not a neutral public square. It's a corporate infrastructure that cooperates with state power.
Let's zoom out even further, because there's a global dimension to this that deserves attention. The viral fascination with Chuando Tan is not just a social media phenomenon. It's a data event that spans dozens of countries and involves millions of users across multiple platforms. When content goes viral at this scale, it creates what data scientists call a signal event, a moment where massive amounts of behavioral data are generated simultaneously, allowing platforms and their partners to calibrate their models with unusual precision.
In practical terms, that means Instagram, and by extension Meta, can use the engagement patterns around Tan's birthday post to refine their understanding of how different demographic groups respond to content related to aging, beauty, masculinity, health, and aspiration. That information is then applied not just to advertising targeting, but to the fundamental architecture of what content gets shown to whom. The algorithm learns from these moments, and it uses what it learns to shape what billions of people see every day.
And here's what's truly concerning from a surveillance perspective. These behavioral profiles don't stay within the platforms that create them. Through data partnerships, advertising networks, and sometimes outright data breaches, this information flows into a vast ecosystem of brokers, analysts, and intelligence agencies. Your reaction to a photo of a 60-year-old man becomes part of a profile that might be used to assess your health insurance risk, your creditworthiness, or your political leanings.
That might sound like paranoia, but it's documented reality. Investigations by journalists, academics, and regulators have repeatedly shown that social media engagement data is bought and sold in ways that most users never consent to and rarely understand. The Cambridge Analytica scandal was just the tip of the iceberg. The infrastructure for mass behavioral surveillance through social media is more sophisticated today than it has ever been.
So when we look at the Chuando Tan story, we see layers that most coverage ignores entirely. On the surface, it's a heartwarming story about a man who defies conventional aging. But beneath that surface, it's a story about how our attention is harvested, how our insecurities are monetized, how our biometric data is scraped without consent, and how the platforms we use for entertainment are deeply entangled with both corporate and state surveillance systems.
And the fact that this particular story originates in Singapore, one of the world's most technically advanced surveillance states, only underscores these connections. Singapore has been a pioneer in integrating technology into governance, from its Smart Nation initiative to its extensive use of sensors and cameras in public spaces. The country treats data as a strategic asset, and the massive data event generated by Chuando Tan's viral moments is no exception.
Let's talk about what individuals can do with this knowledge, because awareness without action is just entertainment. First, understand that every engagement on social media, every like, every comment, every share, is a data point that feeds surveillance systems. That doesn't mean you should never engage. It means you should engage consciously, understanding what you're giving up each time.
Second, support organizations fighting for digital rights and data privacy. Groups like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, Access Now, and regional organizations across Asia are doing critical work pushing back against mass surveillance. They need funding, volunteer support, and public attention. The fact that you're watching this show suggests you care about these issues. Channel that care into action.
Third, pay attention to the regulatory environment. Laws like Singapore's POFMA, the European Union's GDPR, and various proposed U.S. privacy laws will shape the future of surveillance and data rights for decades. Contact your representatives. Submit public comments. Vote for candidates who take digital rights seriously. The surveillance infrastructure we're building today will be very difficult to dismantle tomorrow.
And fourth, take Chuando Tan's actual message seriously. Not the viral spectacle, but the substance. He's saying that taking care of yourself, being disciplined about health and wellness, is more powerful than any product or procedure. In a world where the beauty industry spends billions trying to convince you that you need their interventions, that simple message of self-reliance is genuinely radical.
Now, before we wrap up, Maya, I want to synthesize what we've uncovered tonight. Because the Chuando Tan story is really a case study in how modern surveillance capitalism works. It starts with something genuine, a real person living a real life. Then the platforms amplify it, not because it's important, but because it generates engagement. That engagement creates data. That data is harvested and sold. And the cycle continues, with each iteration making the surveillance apparatus more powerful and more intrusive.
Exactly right. And what makes this case particularly instructive is that there's no villain in the traditional sense. Chuando Tan isn't doing anything wrong. He's sharing his life on social media, just like billions of other people. The followers engaging with his content aren't doing anything wrong either. They're expressing genuine amazement and admiration. But the systems capturing and monetizing that interaction, those systems are operating with a logic that prioritizes extraction over consent, profit over privacy, and control over autonomy.
The beauty industrial complex benefits. Meta and its advertising partners benefit. Data brokers benefit. Facial recognition companies benefit. Governments with access to platform data benefit. The only people who don't fully benefit are the users themselves, who are simultaneously the product, the consumer, and the subject of surveillance, all while scrolling through birthday photos.
And that's the pattern we see across every story we cover on this show. Whether it's a viral celebrity moment, a government surveillance program, or a corporate data breach, the fundamental dynamic is the same. Ordinary people generate value through their attention, their engagement, their biometric data. And powerful institutions capture that value with minimal transparency and virtually no accountability.
The Chuando Tan story is a reminder that surveillance doesn't always look like cameras on street corners or agents in trench coats. Sometimes it looks like a birthday post that makes you smile. Sometimes the most effective surveillance is the kind that feels like entertainment, the kind you participate in willingly, even enthusiastically, without ever realizing what you're giving away.
And that's perhaps the most important insight of all. The most dangerous surveillance systems are the ones we don't recognize as surveillance. They're embedded in the platforms we use every day, in the content we consume, in the interactions we have with friends and strangers online. Until we develop a collective literacy about how these systems work, we'll continue to be harvested without our knowledge or meaningful consent.
So the next time you see a viral photo and feel that urge to like, comment, or share, pause for just a moment. Not to deny yourself the enjoyment, but to ask yourself, who else is watching me watch this? Who is recording my reaction? And what will they do with that information? Those questions are the beginning of surveillance awareness, and awareness is the first step toward resistance.
Well said, Alex. And to Chuando Tan himself, happy 60th birthday. Your discipline and commitment to health are genuinely inspiring. We just wish the systems surrounding your story were as honest and transparent as you've been about what it actually takes to age well.
Before we go, we want to remind our viewers that Truth Report is committed to investigating the intersection of technology, power, and privacy. If you have tips, documents, or stories about surveillance overreach, corporate data harvesting, or government monitoring programs, reach out to us through our secure channels. Your identity will be protected.
And remember, in a world where every click is tracked, every face is scanned, and every interaction is monetized, the most radical thing you can do is pay attention to who's paying attention to you. Knowledge is the antidote to surveillance, and sharing that knowledge is an act of resistance.
That's all for tonight. I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity.
Stay informed. Stay vigilant. And as always, stay free. Good night.